All right, we are live. I'm here with Brian Devoil and of Twelfth Night.
Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I wanted to first of all say thank you for joining me, and also I found out about you through a friend of mine when we first went to uh, a prog festival in Los Angeles, and IQ was playing in 1993. And he told me, he said, if you like this band, you're gonna love 12th Night. So it took me a while to find at that time any CDs, especially in America.
Mm-hmm.
But the first one that I did buy was this
Collector's item. Yeah. Second edition, that one.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this a few years ago, that there's a different song.
There's a slightly different track listing on the first version. Yeah.
And that was my and then when then of course you reissued Fact and Fiction.
Yeah.
That's the one that really got me into. Yeah, that's the one that really got me into.
Quite recent. That was June 2018 we released that.
Yeah. And since then I've been slowly getting all of the especially now the newer definitive editions.
Sure.
Like the most recent one I got was Smiling at Grief.
Ah, okay.
And I did listen
not to be confused with the version we've just released, the Smiling
right.
Visited.
Yeah, that one has remixes, and also are there some, I noticed some of the songs sound different, like the re-recordings. Or
yes, a couple of them are probably the main one that was re-recorded was Makes No Sense, which Tim Bowness and Brian Hulse did a completely new version of that. All of the others are remixes, in some cases, quite a few cases, with added instrumentation and some variation. But that was a brand new recording, which was fabulous that they did that.
Yeah, I was enjoying that one, and then honestly, since I've just been listening to it, the one that I believe Simon Godfrey remixed for you guys.
Yeah, he did Creepshow.
Yeah.
He lives in America, doesn't he, Simon?
He lives down a little further south of me, I think. Yeah. I've talked with him too. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And speaking of Creepshow, that's my, I have to say, one of my favorites of. And I mentioned to like Palace and IQ that Creepshow, and then with Palace, the Ripper, and then the Enemy Smacks from IQ. Those three seem to have like a really dark things going on,
Yeah. Well, Creepshow certainly. I don't know those other tracks particularly well, but Creepshow certainly has a dark side. Yeah.
Yeah, when I listened to it, it just Jeff's vocals, I think, are in Prague are one of the most unique ones that I've heard, especially in this style of prog that they call neo prog. Because he didn't sound like anyone else. You know, he had the very unique voice.
No, well, he came to singing later. I mean, I met Jeff at university. I mean, he was a fine artist then, and as in painter, and he also did performance art. And he came to singing as in being a vocalist after all of that, which is why some of his early things he did were very unusual. And so he didn't understand. Well, he didn't know what the rules were, so he didn't know which ones he was breaking.
Right.
I mean, Jeff was a fantastic vocalist, not a fantastic singer, which I think I would say is probably true of several of our contemporaries at the time. I mean, possibly even, dare I say it, Peter Gabriel wasn't a fantastic singer, but as a front man, as a lyricist, and as a vocalist, was without bit. And of course, Jeff had lyrics. I mean, there are no better lyrics in progressive rock or virtually any music than the lyrics that Jeff wrote. And I say that with my hand on my heart. I know he was in my band, but his lyrics are just out of this world, I think.
Yeah, they're very thought-provoking, and
Sure.
And they hit you like with a gut punch, you know, and it's like type of a feel where you know, when you finish the song, you feel like you've been changed, you know. Honestly, for the better, because you know you get a different. I mean,
well, I think that Jeff would, you know, were he alive today, would be very pleased to hear you say that, because I think that was the raison d'etre of him writing his words, was to have meaning and to create, you know, thought-provoking ideas. And I mean, obviously, he continued that afterwards in his solo work. I mean, you know, and his solo albums and the ones he did with the Bond and AGF Man Band, where he was obviously, you know, embracing his Christianity.
right.
But I mean, and even so, in that, I mean, his lyrics are just astonishing, I think.
Yeah. The one that was besides Creepshow, the lyrics that he did for a song that was you were already playing was Sequences. You know, you were doing that as an instrumental, and then I think right there, that's talent in itself, to put lyrics to an instrumental piece and make it work.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wanted to sort of didn't know our music, or was interested from what you're saying there, wanted an example of how clever he was, we released versions of that track, Sequences, at the end of 2018. There it is. That's a little CD digipack. That was released actually to commemorate the centenary of the end of the First World War.
Yes.
And which is what Jeff's lyrics are about. And on that particular version of that album, we've got the instrumental version and the version with lyrics. You can also go back to previous albums to hear live versions with lyrics, Live and Let Live, or without lyrics, are Live at the Target album. But to see how the piece works perfectly well as an instrumental piece, and then takes on a whole different meaning with Jeff's vocals. I mean, what a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know is, unless they've studied the history or read our lovely biography, and was that early in 1979, Jeff joined the band for a couple of weeks, and we went to Manchester to rehearse in his parents' house, and we were working on aspects of Sequences then. So although probably the majority of the instrumental parts were written at that point, we did actually have quite a few bits that had vocals on.
Okay.
And then the track was arranged and rearranged. And the reason it's called Sequences is simply because it's a sequence of bits that we stuck together. And although it works perfectly well instrumentally, Jeff's lyrics make the whole thing make total sense. And that, I think, is a perfect example of the genius of the man, you know.
Yeah, it's in modern times we don't, you know, with the modern prog bands, we don't hear so much about him. And I think that's honestly, I think that's really wrong, because he is just as important as Fish, you know, Peter Nichols, Ewan Lawson, you know, all the, you know, it's just as important as they are, and and it should be, honestly should be celebrated. And I know in a small circle with the IQ base, that they, you know, I notice a lot on Facebook, they talk a lot about Jeff.
Well, Pete Nichols and Jeff became quite close friends. I think IQ supported Twelfth Night a few times, and Jeff after that Jeff supported IQ a few times, and because they both lived in Manchester, or Jeff was in Salford, I'm not quite sure where Peter was, but it was certainly in that part of the world. They became good friends, and they wrote together and recorded some things together. There are a few of those tracks that are available on our Bandcamp page. Can't remember offhand which album it is, because I put about 10 of Jeff's albums up there. But yeah, him and Pete were good friends. I think anybody who is familiar with Jeff would celebrate him alongside the other people you mentioned.
Right.
I don't think he would ever be felt to be not in the same league, as it were, or whatever. There's a great photo, actually, which has been used many times, which was taken at the Reading Festival in 1983. And it's Jeff, Fish, and Ewan Lawson having a conversation backstage. I mean, it's certainly in our biography, and I've used it in various places, and occasionally the Afterglow archive people post it. That's a group over here, but it's quite a well-known picture. And I mean, yeah, I mean, a conversation between Jeff and Fish in particular would have been one to have been a fly on the wall.
Right.
Because I think that would have been very. I mean, we knew, you know, we did encounter that. I mean, we didn't meet the other guys very much. Certainly, I mean, I say IQ supported us a couple of times, but we never played a gig with Pendragon or Solstice. Actually, we did play with Solstice at the venue once, and we never played with Marillion. I mean, I remember early on they were asking us if they could support us, and of course, latterly, you know, we might have asked them to support them, but so we didn't see a lot of each other. I mean, I remember we saw Marillion play in the Target, which was our hometown. But we did hang out together from time to time. We had a number of parties that they came to. Some of the guys came to, and Fish and I both had a very good mutual friend who was our PR agent, Keith Goodwin. And Fish was a regular house guest of his, as was I, but never at the same time, which is a shame, because I think that would have been quite good fun. But,
yeah, and also the artwork. Especially on Fact and Fiction, you know, it right there. It was very, very unique kind of art, and that's what Jeff did.
The interlocking heads was a theme that, I mean, he just developed that. I mean, there are loads of different sketches and paintings and things where he used that particular theme. We've used another one on the back of the Smiling Grief Revisited LP, which is again the interlocking heads idea with the different eyes. I mean, Jeff's style was, if I say it's a bit like Picasso, that sounds pretentious, but it was in that kind of area. I'm not an expert in painting. I mean, it's a bit abstract, bit cubist. Is that the right word? I mean, certainly, you know, unusual. But he was very, very talented. Very, I mean, his stuff is very stylized. I mean, I've got a couple of pictures here of his. But the other thing was, of course, that in our early days, and I'm thinking Live at the Target, Smiling at Grief, Fact and Fiction, where we were actually making our own records. We weren't on a record label, we had to release them ourselves. In those days, doing colour sleeves was much more expensive than black and white. These days,
right,
if you're making a CD, a colour booklet and a black and white booklet cost about the same. But in those days, it was all black and white, and which lends itself to a different type of artwork, and is the reason why all of the covers of Live at the Target, Smiling at Grief, and Fact and Fiction are all just black and white. There's no colour in the original albums at all. But it meant that, you know, we had to work quite hard on the artwork. Well, certainly Jeff did anyway. And he drew pieces of posters for us and various other things. And Smiling at Grief, for example, there's a lot of little bits of art. 3 Ways to Make Fish is the one I've used on the LP as an insert and on the CD, which has nothing to do with the fish that we've been talking
right.
in case anyone thinks that was some bizarre dig at Derek, Mr. Fish. No, that was just Jeff doing ideas. And another one of his drawings is Clive used on his Sweet Critique album, which is his orchestral recompositions of our early music, as opposed to cover versions of famous prog songs, which Clive has done on his most recent album, Tales from a Misspent Youth. Yeah,
I heard some of those on the little clips on YouTube channel. It was, it's like you hear it at the beginning, like the one "Get for Supper's Ready," and it takes on a whole different life doing it, purely instrumental, and
I mean, it's one of those things where, you can really, a lot of people have said how much they like it, and a few people have said it doesn't really work for them, which I think is perfectly understandable, because you're taking classic songs and you're not, Clive is, because I did a lot of work in the background on this as to how we were going to present them, and whereas Clive recomposed our own music because it was our own music and therefore we had our blessing to do it, so he was able to change the arrangements and as well and the structure. With other people's music, you can't do that without them giving you very, very specific permission, and lots of people certainly wouldn't allow you to do it. So they're cover versions, but with different instrumentation and orchestral instrumentation in this case. I mean, it's to put it like this, it was a publishing nightmare trying to work out what permissions we needed from whom, and even at the highest level in publishing companies, because I've got contacts at managing director level, we were getting conflicting stories about what we needed to do, what permissions we needed, whether we needed permissions at all, etc., etc. So, that's just a little bit of what happened in the background. But it's been reasonably successful. But it's very different, and I'd advise anyone to try before they buy. Go onto Bandcamp and have a listen and see if you like, orchestral arrangements of Supper's Ready and things like that.
That's what I like about Bandcamp, that you can go and you can listen, stream it, and then, just so, get the feel for it, and then, whether or not you want to purchase, the CD or the LP or whatever, the physical media. I know there's a lot of people that only like to stream music, and the downside is that is when licensing uh, expires, your favorite song or your favorite album from, Spotify might disappear. And
Mm.
then, then you get people complaining, oh, it's not there anymore. And they don't understand the licensing factor. So that's why I always tell them, I said, just buy CD. And if you
Well, it
can't,
is. I mean, and also as artists, I mean, obviously, Twelfth Night is we have our own record label as well, so we're artist and record label. I mean, we earn far more from sales of physical product. Of course, the problem we have over here at the moment is the new regulations to do with VAT and selling CDs into Europe is an absolute minefield at the moment, unfortunately.
I've noticed that. I was reading
Yeah.
different things about that, how there's what the mail order place in England that I get an email every
Burning
month,
Share.
Bernie Shed, that they had a little it's just a little section to explain to people in Europe, this is, and I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah, I think they've only just. I mean, I think what they've just done is because they're they're a larger company and their turnover, they've registered for what's called the VAT scheme, and therefore what it means is that customers are charged an extra amount of VAT. Do you have VAT in America?
No, I
You
don't
have
think so.
sales tax, so it's
Sales
similar.
tax, similar,
Yeah,
yeah.
but over here which is different percentages for different states, isn't it? But over here
Yeah.
in Europe, it's nationwide. So the rate over here is 20%, and in Germany it's 19, or the Netherlands it's 23 or something like that. It varies. Sweden probably 25%. And it's charged at source. If you're a marketplace, like for example eBay or Amazon, and Bandcamp is, and so when people buy our CDs from Bandcamp, they're charged VAT at source, which is great. So I send off the CD, and then the customs in their country decide they want to charge them VAT again and a handling fee. And I mean, we've had some horrendous stories. Excuse me. I had a guy in Denmark, very, very nice guy, bought a CD from us for £12, had to pay the VAT on it, had to pay shipping, it was about £5. Got to Denmark, he had to pay the VAT again and the handling fee. And in the end, he spent something like £38 to get a £12 CD. Now, luckily for us, lots of our fans understand the problems and they don't penalise us. But several people won't come back and buy again. I wouldn't blame them. And It's killing small businesses. I mean, it's a real problem. I mean, people are working on solutions, and I now send out lots of extra paperwork. I mean, it takes about 5 times as long now to send a CD to France or Germany as it did before Brexit and the regulations. I mean, I've got the time to do it and the inclination, but if someone's trying to run a commercial operation with lots of volume and stuff, I mean, it's just untenable, unfortunately. It's easier to send to America now than it is to France, and that didn't used to be the case. Although it's very, very expensive to send to America.
Yeah, I've seen some of the prices, and sometimes where it used to, I think, only take just a little bit under a week, but sometimes it takes 2 weeks,
Yeah.
Because our mail system, I think it's getting back to what it was, but it was all discombobulated and everything, things were taking longer, even
Yeah.
within a state, it was taking longer, where it would take normally a day. I heard stories of things taking up to a week. And so mailing everywhere nowadays seems to have their extra things.
Very disappointed. I mean, we've just released this Smiling at Grief Revisited on LP. First time I've actually made a vinyl on our own label in 40 years. And I'm charging £18 for the LP, but the postage to America is £19. It's more. If I send 3 CDs to a package with 3 CDs to America, it costs £16. I mean, it's just crazy. But I mean, the dollar's probably doing well against the pound, so it probably doesn't cost you quite as much as it appears to be. But anyway, let's get off the subject.
Yeah. Okay. Now we talked about the Jeff Mann. Now, ones with Andy Sears.
Yeah.
I noticed with these ones, the direction, while it stayed true to what it was with Jeff, it had a slightly more slick sound to it, and in some ways, on the shorter songs, kind of very, dare I say, new wave sound.
What you like? Yeah. Yes, indeed. I mean, that was a conscious decision on our part to try and move towards the mainstream a little bit. It was also because we chose Andy Sears to be our new singer, and he is technically a much better singer, and therefore it moved us more into that direction. The first album we did was Art and Illusion, the one you held up there, the blue and yellow. That was actually, we had a producer for that, because we'd signed by that time with Hit and Run, which is the Genesis management company, and they sent us off to a studios in Liverpool called Amazon, which we later discovered was owned by Hit and Run, or part owned by Hit and Run. And we had a producer called Gil Norton. Now, he'd worked with Echo and the Bunnymen, and I'm right in saying the Pixies. So quite clearly, his terms of reference were closer to, as you said, that new wave, you said, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then, of course, we went to, when we did the Virgin album, which is the other one you showed there, or X11 as it's sometimes called. It's officially 12th Night. Why did it never have a title? We never found out. We had a producer called John Walters, and an exec producer, Richard Burgess. Richard Burgess and John Walters were both in a band called Landscape, who had a couple of hit singles over here, Einstein a Go-Go being the most well-known. And Richard Burgess was also one of the producers of Spandau Ballet. So again, they were coming from that direction. And I mean, we were trying to have some commercial success because we wanted to build and sustain a career. And we felt that some commercial success would help, as indeed it ultimately did for Marillion. I think, it was the fact they had 2 or 3 top 10 singles that really helped the record company have the faith in them to continue. I mean, I can't remember the exact how many years it went on, but certainly the fact that, they had a couple of decent singles off the early albums and then a huge hit with Kaylee, helped their career. And we were looking for the same kind of thing. But unfortunately, it never happened.
I had that same kind of thing when I spoke with Mike Stobby with
Yeah.
Alice, he said they had that same thing where it's like they never had that major label success that Marillion had, and I posed to him this. It's like, do you think you would have been happy? I mean, maybe back then you probably would have thought being happy, but when going with mainstream labels, they tell you more and change your outlook. You know what you want your music to sound like. They change it to something that doesn't resemble what you your original idea.
Well, I think, there's always an element of compromise there. I mean, there's an element of compromise inside a band. I mean, if you've got 5 musicians, or all of who've got opinions, I mean, you'll get quite a spread there to start with.
Right.
So, I mean, you've got to. I mean, I suppose in a way, what I'm saying is we were trying to play the long game. In other words, if we wanted to stay as musicians, you've got to earn some money. I mean, we were all by 1986, 5 when we signed with Virgin. We were all, sort of late 20s, whatever, something like that. We'd all had relationships, all wanted to sort of, we weren't living in a house together by then. We needed to earn some money and not live off other people, which, as it were. And therefore, a little bit of compromise to have some commercial success to then perhaps enable you to, do more of what you wanted musically. Although we never did anything we didn't want to do. I mean, we were enjoying it. I mean, I like all the eras of the band. I mean, I know that for some people, the era with Jeff is the best era. Other people really like the instrumental era, and other people really like what we did with Andy. I mean, there are other variations, obviously, since we got back together 20 years later. But yeah, as I say, the long game, and that's part of the reason. For example, I kept hold of the rights to all our material, because I hoped that would, pay benefits in the long run. And the only album we don't have the rights to is the one we did with Virgin, because we signed a record deal with them, which was quite interesting because it was for the whole world and any parts of the universe that may be from time to time visited by man. I seem to remember that was a clause in the contract. So the world and the universe. But we only did the one album with them. And unfortunately, the rights didn't revert. So they still have the rights. So if anyone downloads that or streams it from Spotify, the money goes to Virgin and we don't see a penny of it, and never have done. But, we've got all the rest is ours, so that's fine.
Right. Yeah. It and then you went, and this compilation came out with that song, "The Collector." With Jeff singing again. It's like this was like another one of my favorite songs that I listened to a lot. I like the epics because it takes you on a journey, not only with the lyrics but with the music. It goes through different phases, and
yeah, there's more to get your teeth into, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, I like some short songs. I mean, the short songs are great to listen to, but when you want something thought provoking, or you want to take a little journey, that the longer tracks are perfect for that. And that, when was that song actually? Compilation says The Collector.
The Collector was written while Jeff was in the band in 1983, and was being worked on, and we played it live at some marquee shows and some gigs in the summer. And we played it at Jeff's farewell shows, which were in the November. They didn't feature, that track didn't feature on the Live and Let Live album, for the simple reason that we could only afford to record 6 tracks, as in 40 minutes worth, and we predetermined which tracks we were going to record. One of the main ones being sequences, because we hadn't had recorded a version of that with Jeff. There was the instrumental version previously. And so when, after the band finished in 1986, 1987, it was a few years later, we got back went into a studio with Jeff to record the Collector, because it was a bit of unfinished business. We'd never recorded it. We got live recordings, but not multi-track ones, just sort of, cassette tapes. And by then, Clive had got his own studio called Animal House, and one of the engineers there was Mark Spencer, who subsequently has become our main man. So yeah, we went back in there. I went back to our Music for Nations, the label that we did Art and Illusion and Live and Let Live with, who had a very, very good relationship with, and they were very happy to put out the Collector's items. So we put together 3 sides, thinking of it as a double vinyl. There were 3 sides of greatest hits or best tracks from other previous releases, and then the brand new version of the Collector. And we also recorded a new version of Love Song, and that was the 4th side. Most of those tracks appear on the CD, and most, again, slightly different track listing on a cassette. It was our first multi-format, triple format release. It was CD, LP, and cassette. And that, I think, was in 1993.
I think it was, yeah. 93. I think it said 93 or 91. I'm not sure.
Years I'm not so good at. I've got a good memory for lots of things, but I often find years quite difficult. I can tell you all through the band's primary career, which was like 1978 to 1987. I know I can remember all those years because I can hang it around, the albums that were released, and
right.
I know which years they were all in and stuff like that. But since then, after 87, I'm not quite so good.
And then, of course, we spoke about this one here, and this is your last studio album, right? Or EP.
That is, well, I call it an album because it's over 40 minutes worth. Well, I think it's more than 40 or 50 minutes worth of music.
Right.
So I don't think of it as an EP, but yes, that was the last thing that we recorded. It's not the last thing that we released that was effectively a new release. That was in November 2019 when we released A Night to Remember, which was the live recording of our, what we consider to be our farewell show at the Barbican Theatre in London, which was hold on, I'll get this right. That was in December 2012. That's right, because it's the 10th anniversary of that coming up this year. Yeah, it took us quite a long time to get that ready, and that was the first release and the only release we've ever done on Blu-ray format, as well as DVD and a double CD. So that was, that there was quite a lot of work involved in putting that together.
Right.
And so that, since then, the only I have to try and remember this. Yeah, I mean, it's been Smiling at Grief Revisited, and in between I've re-released some of our archive release series, which are our CDRs of gigs that weren't, only recorded on sort of cassettes rather than multi-tracks. And yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, I don't think there's anything between sequences and A Night to Remember. And since then, no, that's right. But that was the last time I recorded brand new music. I mean, Mark Spencer, bless him, did most of the heavy lifting on sequences. As in, he programmed the drums initially for me, and I then played along and over the top. And he basically fleshed out some of the parts. He played all the keyboards, did all the orchestration, and then Mr. Revel, played the guitar, and we got Andy Faulkner in to play bass, who's currently playing in a couple of bands at the moment. A band called Jump. He's been in, and he's also played this last weekend in Market Square Heroes, which is obviously a Marillion tribute band.
Right. Yeah, I noticed on YouTube they have some of the clips from that night to remember, and I've heard a lot of, and I read a lot of comments that Mark kind of almost conjures the spirit of Jeff in a way, because I've never seen Twelfth Night in any form, but thank goodness for YouTube that people put up clips of the older pieces, and I can see that how Mark is kind of like
well, Mark's story with us is quite interesting, because when we reunited in 2007, Mark joined us to play keyboards, and I think he also played a little bit of bass. And then when we did some more gigs in 2010, 2012, he ended up playing keyboards and bass and guitar. And then in 2010, and then 2012, he made his debut as vocalist. So he went up through the ranks, and the interesting thing is that his voice has similar characteristics to Jeff.
Yes.
So when he first sang with us, we focused on the material we did with Jeff, and so the subsequent gigs in 2012, he joined us. His first gig was at the beginning of the year. Were from that era. Although Mark's done a fantastic version of a song of ours called Kings and Queens, which we did with Andy, where he plays every single instrument, including the drums, and sings. I think we've probably released it on something. It might be on MMX. Can't remember, but it's around somewhere. But he's a very talented man, but, which is why he also currently plays in Galahad. He's in Alan Reed's touring band, Alan Reed being one of the previous singers of Palace. And he's also in a band called Coburg with Dean Baker, who's also in Galahad and our live keyboard player, and a fabulous girl singer, guitarist, piano player. So anyway, he's a busy man. I think I've mentioned all his bands. I hope I haven't forgotten.
Yeah.
And Twelfth Night, of course. But
yeah, because I first heard of Mark, because of Galahad, and I spoke with Stuart and can't think of it.
Lee the guitarist, Dean the bass. Dean Baker.
I spoke with those two, and it's really the scene that you guys had from your late 70s and into the almost the end of the 80s was I think it just is.
You were alive then, were they? They're much younger, actually. I'm just being cheeky.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for the 78. Yeah. I think they're closer to a little older than me.
Okay.
I'm in my mid 50s, so they're a little older, but
I mean, we've always had a very, I mean, we know the guys in Galahad very well, and obviously we borrowed Dean and the guitarist at the time, Roy Keyworth, in 2010, and they did some shows with us, including Lorelei, which in Germany, which was fantastic. And they're both on the live album and DVD that we produced from that period, which is called MMX, which is 2010. And Dean stayed with us ever since as our live keyboard player. And Mark was in Galahad for a while, and then he wasn't, and now he is again. And in fact, in 2010, the first gig that Roy and Dean did with us was back in Reading, which was our hometown. I think Stuart was there, and I'm pretty sure he got up and sang with the encore with us. Although I think probably luckily there aren't any recordings of that. At least not that we're prepared to release. But and then we did another show where Alan Reed came and sang the encore love song with Andy Sears, because Alan Reed and Andy Sears have always got on particularly well. And again, we're very close with Alan, and of course Mark's in his band as well. So we get on very well.
Yeah, I heard the song that Alan, did a love song where he duetted with Kim Savior.
Yeah. That's on the Fact and Fiction triple CD. It's on the covers CD of that.
Yeah, that's like that was a good way of doing it. Having a duet.
And that was arranged by Mark Spencer, of course. That particular track. And Alan used to do it live. I mean, because when Alan and Mark used to do some little two-man shows, they used to do love song quite often, which is nice. That's a great track. I mean, again, fabulous lyric of Jeff's, and I think quite a lot of people in the prog community are quite aware of that track. It's very highly regarded, isn't it? And again, it's got a fabulous little religious reference that is just subtle, but
right. Yeah, for me, I don't mind when it's subtle. Just the ones when they kind of put it all out there.
Of course.
Because I prefer when it's spiritual. Because then it's right across the board for everybody to they can understand it, and it's not something specific for a certain religion. It's just for everybody across the board. And I like those kind of songs too, the best, because it's like, anyone in any religion can relate to it because it's in the spiritual.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but I also do appreciate people that if that's what they feel, deep down, and they want to sing that, I think that's fantastic for them.
It is something I mean, I think our situation's quite well documented. It wasn't, wasn't something we particularly when Jeff was in the band, we necessarily shared his beliefs. We fully respected his beliefs, but we didn't necessarily share it, and therefore the references were quite subtle at that time. But obviously, once Jeff was doing his solo work, he was free to be much more explicit, which he was, and very successfully.
Oh yeah, it's almost nowadays it's a mirror version of there's an American band, Spock Spear, and when the singer Neil Morris, when he went to go solo, that's when he he did more of his Christian and so it's like it's some people are a little taken back by it, others embrace it. So it's like, it's whatever, you feel and what you believe. If it fits your beliefs, that's fantastic. I mean, I just think with with progressive rock music, I think you need to be more in the spiritual sense and then more in the fantastical, because you're creating stories, whether it's a fantasy story or if you're using something of current events, in your, because I'm willing to bet that if Jeff was still alive, he would have an abundance of subject matter to write.
Well, I think the strange thing is, I mean, certainly I don't think there's any fantasy in Jeff's lyrics. I mean, they were always, Sequence, for example, is a narrative about a guy going off to war. I think that the strange thing is that in 1982, which is 40 years ago, we released an album called Fact and Fiction. I mean, it's now called Fake News. But if you look at the lyrics of a track like We Are Sane, which is about, the first part is called Dictators Excuse Me. Sorry, that's later on, it's TDM, isn't it? But anyway, and look at the lyrics of that and relate it to what's going on in the world today and what's been happening with the rise of the populist leaders like Trump, Johnson, and the rest. The lyrics are uncannily accurate. Fact and Fiction itself, the title track, it references nuclear war and how to prepare for nuclear war. You take a door off and put it against the wall. I mean, look at the lyrics of our Fact and Fiction album and relate it to today, and it's frightening how accurate. I was going to say prescient. I'm not sure that's the right word, but what Jeff was saying, astonishing.
Yeah, it could, makes me, to re-listen to that album again, just, with, like you just said, he kind of predicted this in a way,
Well, funnily enough, there's one of our archive releases, I think it's Night Vision, which we've just redone. One of the intros that Clive developed for that, because we had various intros. The classic Fact and Fiction one was where Clive would speak in an American voice and Jeff would speak in a Russian voice, and they would say the same thing, ending up with the truth is what we tell you, we are the fact and they are the fiction. But one of the other intros that Clive did for We Are Sane, and this was in 1984 or 1985, he says, one day you'll wake up and you'll plug a little box into your head and it'll tell you what to do all day. And that was how many years before mobile phones were invented, smartphones were invented. Right. Because We Are Sane is about mind control, controlling the masses and getting them to do what you want and all that kind of thing. And his intro basically was predicting, the invention and the use of mobile phones. I mean, I was listening to it the other day when we were re-editing, and I was thinking, wow, that's a bit of a prediction.
Right. Is anything in the future for Twelfth Night, the studio album wise?
Not at the moment. And I mean, Clive is working on things all the time. I mean, he's got lots of plans. In fact, he emailed me today at about 6 hours ago. He's obviously got another idea up his sleeve, which is brilliant, which is to do with one of our tracks. He's doing some orchestral things. I'd like to think that we could do something together at some stage. I mean, one of the slight differences with Twelfth Night and a lot of our contemporaries is that none of us have ever been career musicians. Now, I'm not necessarily saying all the other guys are. Obviously, the guys in Marillion are. But all of us have always had other things. And I mean, Clive has run his own businesses and been a management consultant. Andy Revel is a very senior person, runs a couple of businesses. So do I. I'm a qualified accountant. Mark does all kind, runs his own bit in business. So it's not something that we kind of have to do in a way, and people's people have got their own lives, so we don't get together very often. So it's very difficult to say whether there will be any new material. I'd like to think so, but I mean, Clive is probably the most likely person to instigate. I mean, we've talked about doing something later this year to commemorate the 40th anniversary of Fact and Fiction. But I mean, obviously COVID has been a bit of a problem in terms of getting people together in a studio, because Mark has his own studio and Clive has his own studio. Clive's is more a one-person studio, whereas Mark's, there's room in there to get 2 or 3 people.
Right.
So I kind of like to think that there'd be something, but I can't make any promises or predictions at the moment.
It sounds
I will do something.
It does kind of sound in the same way how you just described all that with IQ, because IQ doesn't put out albums on a regular basis. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 years in between.
Sure.
Sometimes I think a little more than that, maybe 5 or 6 years or something. And
but they've developed a clear template, with their 2 or 3 gigs a year, the Christmas one and what have you. So they've got a sort of plan that that they work to, which I think is great. I mean, yeah, they're releasing new material, writing and releasing new material, whereas I'm reworking old material and re-releasing things. Partly, I mean, I'm literally in a couple of weeks' time about to announce another version of our Live at the Target CD, but that's simply because we've sold out of the previous ones, which we did in conjunction with F2 Festival Music, and I want to make sure it's still available. So we've slightly changed the artwork, updated it, and it's going to be out for the first time actually on our own label.
Okay, yeah, this one.
So that's right, yeah. So the new sleeve is slightly different to that. We've moved away from that generic style of the LP rack,
right?
Which were lovely artwork that was done for us by Paul Tippett of Vitamin P. And now we're on our own label. We've just reverted to the CD cover being more like the original album.
I think this is one of my older releases too.
Yeah. So the brand new version of that on our own label, the cover is more similar to that.
Yeah, I had a coding system as to, blue was meant live, so it's like, so I knew. So, because sometimes you could, when you're looking really quick, so I couldn't see it, and I just wanted to put the tab on there, and even obviously it says live and let live, so, or live and let live, however you.
I've always said live and let live, but I understand lots of people
say it live, yeah.
Because the reason for that is that originally it was going to be on our own label, and it would have been TN007, because Fact and Fiction the cassette was TN005 and the Fact and Fiction is TN006. So Live and Let Live would have been TN007, and of course there was a James Bond film, Live and Let Die, TN007, Live and Let Live. But in the end, we did a licensing deal with Music for Nations, and it was MFN 18. So it doesn't quite follow through. It's like the track that Jeff wrote called Fact and Fiction, which which is a bonus track on the Fact and Fiction CD, which isn't the track called Fact and Fiction at all. It's called Constant Fact and Fiction. It's completely different lyrics, but we liked the title, so we used it for something else, or he did rather. But that's all explained in the sleeve notes, how it all.
Oh yeah,
and of course, Fact and Fiction was called something else. Like Leader. That's right. Fact and Fiction was originally called Leader. Yeah. But
Yeah, that's what I like about those definitive editions, that they have extensive liner notes. So,
well, I take a lot of time and a lot of care. I mean, it's I just think people deserve to get, you know, a lot for their money, as it were. And I always try and make sure that there's, you know, it's good quality. And I think the Fact and Fiction treaty, now that we're also about to sell out of, and I'm going to have to make some more of them, which is quite an expensive one to make because it's a triple CD digipack. Right. But I want to keep it available, and, you know, again, it'll be on our own label for the first time, because all the definitive editions we did with David Robinson of F2 Festival. But as they've sold through, so we're going to redo the artwork slightly. I mean, that one's got a fabulous 24-page booklet, which is, you know, I'm not going to mess around with that. But I'd quite like to do something, because it's the 40th anniversary of Fact and Fiction being released later this year. That was the reason for Smiling at Grief, was because it was the 40th anniversary. And that, along with Live and Let Live, are the only two albums of ours that we have the multi-tracks for, which means all the individual instruments recorded separately, and therefore we could remix them. We don't have that for any of our other albums, so that's why we did that. And sometime in the next 18 months, I'm hoping to release a DVD of Jeff's farewell shows at the Marquee.
Oh, that'll be nice.
What everyone will be told at the time is that the quality is very, very poor compared to what you would get now, because it was recorded on a handheld VHS cassette camera with a VHS cassette, and we've got one video from one night from one camera and one video from another night, and David Reed, who is our video wizard, is painstakingly stitching it together with the soundtrack, which obviously we do have, to try and make something that would be releasable. But it won't, the plan is it won't be a commercial release. In other words, we won't be giving it to our distributors and resellers. It will be just a fan club only release, simply because of the, of the quality being what it is. But it will be Jeff, singing with the band, and that's something to be treasured. And I'm sure everyone that is a big fan of the band will really enjoy it. But we won't be selling it without that codicil that it is what it is, quality wise. But that's one of the things I hope to release in the next 18 months or so.
That'll be great for people my age group, and also being Americans, that I think the only time you came over here was for Nearfest
in 2010.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, 2012. That's right. Yeah.
2012. Yeah.
And that was also recorded and videoed, and I love to edit the video and remix the soundtrack, but we've never managed to strike a deal with the guys who own the footage, mainly because my understanding is that they were looking for far too many dollars, because it's not a commercial release for us. Again, it was an unusual lineup of the band, in that it contained, it was Andy Andy Sears and myself, Dean Roy and Andy Faulkner. But it was a great show, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. I made a fantastic back projections done by David Reed again. But again, it would be a very, very limited interest, which is why, you know, I'm kind of hoping one day that I might be able to do a deal with the Nearfest guys that, you know, so that we could do something with it. But yeah, that's just another one of those things on the back burner. We've also got some video footage and audio recording of our show in Loreley in 2010. And that was a fantastic venue to play. But again, there are a few technical issues with that need to be ironed out. And again, we have released a video and an album from that tour, or rather that lineup. So is there really sense in doing another one? You know, I mean, I know there's a few people that'd be interested, but it has to sort of, you know, have to be enough to make it worth all the effort. Because the guys that do the video editing for us, I mean, basically do it as a labor of love. I mean, it would be impossible to release any video properly edited and synchronized with, you know, with the soundtrack, you know, without, you know, the generosity of, you know, of those people. And the same is true of the albums, you know, and the amount of time that Mark Spencer put into The Night to Remember is just crazy. I mean, crazy amounts of time to make it sound as good as it does. But that's where we are, you know.
Yeah, you know, if there's enough generated interest in those, those would be great, you know, archive releases. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's why it takes such a long time, is because we have to wait till people have got the time to, you know, to do things, and you know, and they all, as I say, run very successful businesses, and you know, and need to focus on them. I mean, I'm very lucky that we have 3 designers that do artwork for us. Paul Tippett, as I mentioned, has done all the definitive editions and sequences. That album you were showing, which is fantastic artwork. David Reed, who does the videos, has also done all the artwork for A Night to Remember, and he did MMX and Reading Rock. And more recently, there's a guy called Spencer Rowbottom, who has done all the new artwork for all the CDR releases and a couple of sampler albums, which are up on our Bandcamp page. And again, you know, all of them, you know, just very, very generous and with their time, and very, very helpful. But, you know, all have other jobs and families to fit, you know,
right,
house to feed. So that's why it takes a while. And I mean, you know, I've got things planned for the next 2 or 3 years. But that's why I have to have such, you know, long lead times and things, because, you know, it's you know, it's important to, you know, respect those people and the other things they need to do.
Yeah. You know, I just like to say, you know, the music that you've given us so far, you know, big thank you, because music for me is something special. And whenever bands, you know, like Twelfth Night, Crown, you know, it's just, you know, for me it's a special band. Once I got known, you know, I was made known of it, you know, by my friend years ago. So it's like, I mean,
I'm just plugging in my charger.
He knew a lot about the.
What was his name?
His name was Dirk.
Dirk.
And yeah, I have not spoken to him in
All right.
almost 15 years, and
All right.
he does music on his own. And right now, he used to have a prog band, but unfortunately, in Southern California at the time, in in the late 80s, early 90s, it wasn't lucrative enough for them to do. So he did other types of music, and then now he's doing children's music.
Okay. Funny, because strangely enough, I remember my wife and I, before we were married, it must have been in the early 90s. Oh, well, it must have been 93, I would think, 94. Did a fly drive holiday to California.
Oh.
And we flew into San Francisco and drove Highway 1 all the way down to LA and then across to San Diego, down to San Diego and Yosemite, you name it, we did it. But while we were I think it was in San Francisco, we met up with a 12th Night fan. And I remember taking him a copy of the Collector's Item album, which you were mentioning there. And I've got a photo somewhere of me and him with that particular album. So I just wondered for a minute whether it might have been him, but obviously not. Because there weren't many 12th Night fans in those days over in California. Well, yeah, at least not as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, dude. He and his brother, they were, I would say, multi-instrumentalists. And only thing he couldn't do was sing. That was his. He tried, and it just, they told, well, let's just keep it instrumental. Was it, bass, drum, keyboard. They later on added a guitar player, but then they said it just didn't feel right. They just wanted to keep it a tight knit little group, and he's the one that when I went to that festival in 1993, he says, "Oh, IQ, when they come on, you're gonna really love this guy."
Mm-hmm.
So, and then afterwards, he says, "Okay, you like them, right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, another one for you to look up is Twelfth Night." And so those were the two of that British neo prog, which is in some circles is a dirty word, and others it helps.
I mean, it was. It was never a term at the time, but I mean, my understanding is it just meant sort of like the 80s versions of the 80s prog bands as opposed to the 70s prog bands, as in Genesis, Yes, and Pink Floyd and all that. I mean, I don't have any problem with it if it helps people identify, the era it refers to. But
well, for me, it's like it's really all progressive rock, It's just some people that were, how do you say, it's stuck in the 70s, and when you try to tell them about a new band that started recording in the 80s, they.
Well, I think the problem for quite a few people was there was an obvious similarity between some of the neo prog bands and the 70s bands.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's less true of us, or perhaps the people that we were closer to were perhaps less well known, or possibly not as. It certainly wasn't Genesis or Yes, I don't think. I always felt that we had more in common with the Floyd. I mean, somebody once called us Punk Floyd, which I thought was quite funny.
Right.
Stephen Wilson, who you would know from the Porcupine Tree and things, who was a fan at the time. I mean, he said some very nice things about us. In fact, he talked about the Spinal Grief albums. He's done 3 of the remixes on the CD for us, which is fantastic. I mean, I remember I got in touch with him because he's been on our mailing list for many years, and I asked him if he would remix the track for us, and he suggested East of Eden and promptly did it in a few days. And then the following week he then said, "Oh, I've done 3 dancers as well, would you like would you like that? And we said, thank you very much. And he subsequently asked if he can use that track on a compilation he's curating, which I'm not sure when it's due out, but it's a fascinating compilation. Us and the Cardiacs are about as proggy as it gets. It's much more in the sort of new wavy. I mean, there's a lot of bands on there I've never heard of, admittedly, but other people. It's a very interesting concept. And then, of course, a couple of months later, he sent me a mix of puppets and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot I did this one, as well," which is wonderful. And really kind, and that is one of the extra tracks on the CD version of Spinal Grief, which is, as I say, our most recent thing. But yeah, I think there was a point I was going to make about that. I can't remember what it was, but never mind.
Yeah,
similarity with bands. That's right. Yeah. And Stephen was very much. I mean, the reason he liked us was because he felt we had a different edge to a lot of the other bands, a bit of a new wavy type of edge, and in the way we performed, and obviously with Jeff as well. So, and we're very happy with that. I mean, Jeff was a big. Jeff and I were quite big fans of Van der Graaf Generator, who was certainly quite an uncompromising band.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, Clive was very much a Yes ELP fan. Mr. Revel, Rick, keyboard player, Genesis, and Andy Revel. Well, a lot of Andy's guitar influences, as it were, with some of the German bands. I remember there's a band called Ashra. I can't think of the others. He's mentioned them many times before. So there was quite a wide variation. But yeah, you can call us neo-prog. It bothers me not at all.
Yeah, I just enjoy, that's how I look at it. I just enjoy the music, and every time your newsletter comes out, I look forward to seeing what new things you're working on. And
well, there's always something. There's always something. Yeah.
Even if it's not a CD, if you have a story, if you include a story of, or something that you recalled and thought that, I need to alert our fans, this is, certain things like that. It's always kind of nice to get insight into the bands beyond just their music.
Yeah, well, I've always been very happy to talk about the band, as you've just experienced, and I'll answer any question. I mean, if there's something you ask which isn't appropriate, I'll just say, well, it's not appropriate to answer that. But I can't think of anything. You asked me in advance, was there any taboo subjects? No, everything.
You've answered things and that I had, and more, and it's just amazing how you were just saying the Fact and Fiction album, how it relates to modern times. It's it makes it makes me want to go back to listen to it again, and which I have listened to it again, but then where it's more evident that it's a sign of the times type of thing. It's
I mean, I would say, perhaps, I think if you go onto our website, which is twelfthnight.info, there's a page of lyrics, and I think most of our songs' lyrics are listed on there. And if anyone's not, I mean, rather than listen to the music, if you're new to, just have a read of those lyrics, and then listen to the music. But see the quality of the lyric writing. I mean, The Collector, for example. I mean, we didn't mention the lyrics of that. I mean, again, it's a narrative story. Is it narrative story? No, it's not a narrative story. yeah, just read the lyrics to The Collector. It's
Yes.
very, very clever. I mean, Jeff was always one for a stupid pun as well. I mean, he had several of them as album titles. Psalm Enchanted Evening is one of his solo albums, and let's see, Loud Cymbals was another. And I mean, Jeff loved puns. He didn't use that many in his lyrics, but he was quite fond of puns in his album titles and things like that. But still, I'm probably going to run out of juice on my laptop before long.
Well, you know what? Then I want to say thank you again for taking the time out. And I appreciate your music, and I look forward to the upcoming projects that you have for Twelfth Night.
Yeah, well, if anyone's interested, that's the website, twelfthnight.info.
I'll put it down in the description when I put it up on YouTube.
Yeah, send me an email, brian@twelfthnight.info, and take it from there.
All right. Well, thank you again, Brian. I really do appreciate it.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you again.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.